Hi everybody, Dom here from the MethodGrid team, and in this session I'm going to take on the task of giving you a high-level understanding of the MethodGrid solution, and specifically to give everybody a better understanding of how it might be applied in your own organizational team setting. But before we jump into the actual tool itself, just some background context, I guess. And I think the more people understand almost the philosophy that sits behind the solution, the better the solution is understood. So let's just have a look at a little bit of that. So you can see here on the screen, essentially, the kind of world we're talking to is, well, if you can imagine the continuum in a lot of sectors, a lot of sort of industries, where at one end, frankly, you've got organisations where either they're willfully chaotic or frankly, there isn't very much that sort of is the same. Genuinely every day is different. And of course, at the other end of that continuum, we've got organisations that are involved in, very, very large scale sort of monolithic endeavour. But of course, in a sort of normal, standard distribution way, many, many organisations clump in the middle, where broadly speaking, even if it's a very, very sort of technical, esoteric, kind of service industry you're in, broadly speaking, 80% of what you do is repeatable. And actually, you want to do the consistent, repeatable bit in a par excellence way, so that the intellect, the professionalism, the attention of your team and your staff is really focused on the genuinely unique 20%, and often client contingent sort of 20%. So I think that's the starting point. Our platform really talks to those organisations that recognise that, broadly speaking, it follows that 80-20 rule, and they really want to make sure the 80% is done, as I say, par excellence. And then in that context, essentially, the remit we've given ourselves over the years is to do everything we can to bring together both knowledge management and project management. What do we mean by that? Well, I think, to get beyond the soundbite of these terms, from a knowledge perspective, leading organizations do everything they can to, capture, curate, and constantly improve their understanding of what best practice looks like. And clearly from a project management perspective, when you have a delivery instance of particular kind of service, you're doing it to, time, cost, and quality, and again, in a very highly efficient manner. And the more those two aspects come together, genuinely you kind of you can bring together this real virtuous cycle of you've created a reference for best practice, you deliver to it, you can sit back then as a team at the end of a delivery and say, what did we learn from that, and you can accrete that sort of new understanding of best practice, that all those improvements back into the master reference point. And frankly, if you talk about continuous improvement but don't have a central master, that's commonly understood, then it really is not much more than a soundbite. So, fundamentally, MethodGrid is looking to make, at a very practical, pragmatic level, those two capabilities really come together. And the more they come together, the more that sort of virtuous flywheel kind of rotates. So if that makes sense, I think it's also worth talking to the fact that, if this is successfully embedded, then there are many, many benefits that our clients' feedback that have resulted. I think firstly, for some businesses, it's frankly just about building value in their IP. For a lot, it's about just delivering more consistently, and clearly with consistency becomes a sort of brand reputational benefit. Of course, enhanced productivity, just getting more out of the team. Related to that is just effectively having project-based control. I think for a lot of organisations, 5 is really important. Again, they really, really want to emphasise the collaborative nature of their culture and of their teams, and technology has a real role to play there. It can really emphasise those kind of human connections, to make sure that sort of collaborative culture is really brought to life. I think for a number of our clients would say actually, certainly their primary use case, at least in the first instance, was just effective onboarding, either of staff if they're in sort of high growth mode, or indeed of clients, just to make sure again there's real consistency in that discipline. Again, I think there's a real subset of businesses would say demonstration of their expertise in a very manifest way, like a deep toolbox can do is key to them differentiating from competitors and frankly winning more work. And then finally, another aspect would be just frankly oversight and having clarity as to what's going on, particularly in large organisations. I think it's worth saying also everybody's got a slightly different footprint as to which priorities are really driving their curiosity into sort of new platforms, but typically tends to be a spread across those, and invariably the benefit from all of them can ultimately come. The other point we make to all of our sort of new clients is they've got to look at this through the lens of not just being a technology implementation. We'll often say that technology in and of itself changes very, very little. You can't expect to just press the button and the world to change. So, even being a technology vendor, we really sort of emphasise the fact that this has to be looked at through the lens of essentially a capability improvement initiative. And there are many aspects that sit beside technology in that kind of context. Not least, real clear leadership support for the initiative. Look how it fits into your wider business in terms of your quality management systems, your HR strategies, etc. And frankly, real depth communication to actually make sure everybody's on board. And we go into a lot of detail with that with our sort of certainly our larger clients. So with that sort of background context understood, I'm going to jump into the solution, and the 4 key aspects I think it's important to understand, which in their aggregation really differentiates MethoGrid, would be these 4 here. So this is what we're going to step through in the demonstration. Firstly, how easy it is to actually access and use content in a way that's very contextually relevant to the task, even if it's a very complex task. And that's clearly point number 1 for a solution that seeks to sort of improve a knowledge, sort of knowledge management challenge. Point number 2 will be just how easy it is to sort of build, maintain, and curate and update the platform. And that's a really important point. So many people, try and do this in a sort of fairly hacked way on platforms, ill-suited to the task, and it kind of dies because only a few people really understand how to keep it maintained. And the act of keeping on top of this is really something that everybody, certainly needs to be super intuitive. Everybody can kind of do, make it a living, everyday experience. And then the third point is probably the most axiomatic in terms of explaining the uniqueness of MethoGrid, and that is the confluence of where structured knowledge meets project delivery. And I'm going to sort of run for a quick demonstration as to how those two disciplines can sit together, and the huge benefit of placing them essentially in the same platform. And then lastly, we'll look at some of the dashboard reporting feature set that's building out in a sort of ever improving way. So if that all makes contextual sense, let's dive in now to the platform. Just move my screen down there. So we're in now into a home page. Just to say a few things about the home page. Firstly, it's individualized. Everybody has their own, and what that is then telling me are the grids or the tools, the processes, and playbooks that I'm as an individual using most often, and indeed, which elements within the toolboxes that are personal to me that again I'm using more frequently. You see, it's serving up notifications, and all the notifications and chat that goes on within the app, served up on the home page. As a side point, it's worth noting that we API into common chat apps, Microsoft Teams, Google Chat, Slack, we API to, but yeah, we serve up the notifications on the homepage, and you can see I've got some readout on my tasks, which are fortunately quite empty at the moment. And then over on the right here, we have some sort of gamification that just helps a new user sort of come through the full feature set of the platform. You'll notice across the top here, I'm effectively sat in the sort of front tab of a dashboard, and we're going to come back to the dashboard at the back end of this demonstration, but just to note that it exists there now. Okay, so if that's the sort of home page, the guts of the system is what we call the grid library. And the grid library is effectively where all of a company's an account level, all the sort of IP is kept. So a grid for us, when we use the term grid, a grid is any standalone methodology, operating procedure, training body, client onboarding, staff onboarding methodology. So anything that sort of has a standalone sort of frame essentially as a grid. And then a grid sits in our grid library. And you can see a grid can be organized, along the sort of folder structure, other sort of file explorer view. You can also apply a legend to your overall library, which again is completely bespoke. And you can see in this simple example here, it's following more of a sort of functional sort of logic. So if I wanted to, for example, search for HR grids, use my screen again, and I want to look across the entire library for HR grids, I apply that filter. It will just be pulling back now all grids that are relevant to the HR theme that I've assigned. So quite powerful sort of way of accessing knowledge of certain flavors back. But of course, the most common way of doing this is to search. So if I just type in now, I'm just going to type in the word project, and you can see now it's searching the folders, it's searching the grids and telling me which grids are relevant, and it's even looking down into the grids, into this particular sort of steps and deliverables to pull back relevant content. And this goes right into kind of people in the organization, templates, etc. So it's a powerful sort of search tool. But let's go further. I'm looking for a toolbox, project toolbox. Let's bring back one here to illustrate an actual grid. And of course, to say, right up front, this sits in the cloud. It's a SaaS service, so this is completely responsive to the device and the sort of resolution of the device. And I can, if I want to, change the resolution. I can move this around, but it's it's working right down to a smartphone, right up to a desktop, and completely flexible to the actual viewport that you have. So a grid is made up of essentially columns and rows, and we call the columns stages in so much as they typically denote the stages of a process or a methodology. And you can see here, this is a very, very simple kind of vanilla project management framework, so it's stepping through the stages of a simple project. And I say typically, and I say probably 80% of the grids we see are of the sort of left to right process flow logic. That said, there are a myriad of innovative ways that people use grids, and some really innovative sort of X and Y dimensioning. People, I should say, often use grids as a Kanban board type idea, where elements are dragged across a left to right sort of set of task related buckets. We have all sorts of innovative ways of training libraries being stored, but in the main, it will be the left to right logic through a process. So if that's stages, you can see the themes. Let's move me over. Make up the different, in this instance, subdomains, swim lanes, workflow lanes of projects, of project management, in that this is a project management example. So you can see if I was dealing in the realm of projects, might want to be interested in, governance, how we deliver the benefits for that project, project control, project reporting, cost and resource management, etc. You get the drift. And this grid now is a scrollable in 2 dimensions grid. You'll also note that for every grid, you can bespoke a legend that is assigned just to that grid. So the author of this particular grid has looked at this idea, and it's quite a nice one, of a level of mandatedness that goes with the steps within it. So this essentially is not a big bureaucratic linear process. Everybody's got to do everything. They're essentially saying, as aligned to the quality management system of this particular kind of demo firm, here's a de minimis level of compliance, and maybe that level of mandatedness gets higher as the risk project, as the risk or the scale of the project increases. Again, this is just one example. It's completely configurable, but it's quite a nice device we see often as an aside. So if you can imagine, then we've got our grid. We clearly we know where we are. I can see that here I have mandatory element, which is the business case. Now, if I open up what we call elements, we're effectively going into what we would describe as almost the third dimension of the knowledge, and this is, in this instance, giving me everything I need to know about business cases in the context of project delivery. So, for example, why am I even doing a business case? Maybe there's a relevant, opposite video to watch. We have some maybe blank templates, and maybe we've got some best practice examples that really set that kind of quality standard for the for the wider company. Contextual information, links off to websites. We can link off to other elements within MetaGrid, and some other kind of really key features that we definitely see, closely connotated with leading firms is back to this kind of knowledge collaboration point. Really linking team members in who are experts in this particular aspect. So, for example, if I was to click off to Harry, I could see Harry is an expert in business cases. Harry's profile can be completely bespoke to your own organizational setting, but it's just, it's capturing this key relationship as to who's expert in what as well, which essentially is a sort of 180 degrees view on the same topic. We'll go back into the business case. The final thing I just want to draw our attention to is what we have here is a set of tasks. I'm going to talk about those tasks when we talk about this confluence of knowledge and project management. But you can see, hopefully, from that quick example, how even very complex methodologies, playbooks, can get served up in a very simple to use, graphical, schematic way, which has been road tested, over many, many years has been an approach that just everybody, can get on board with, and just makes even, very, very complex methodology just super easy to digest. So hopefully that's got across point one, which is the ease of content access, which brings us to this point two of there's no point serving this up if you can't kind of make it live and keep on top of it and constantly improve it. So it's got to be something that's really super easy to maintain. So the key bit here then is about how easy it is to build and constantly sort of maintain methodology and intellectual property. And I'm logged in as an architect, and the key point here is to say that there are different levels of member type across the whole account. And at a simple level, architects are super users, builders can build out methodology, and then users are just able to consume and view the content. And that is completely configurable. You can set it at an account level, but you can also manipulate it at specific grid levels. The access control is completely configurable. So I've got sort of super user rights. So let's just say, for example, I'm going to go right in and build, our first grid right from scratch. So I can click on the new grid. And the key thing here that I have, well, actually, before we get to, let me just, reiterate that point. Even at a grid level now, if I wanted to, I could configure who has access to this grid, who's able to build in it, etc. And even to the point where we see a lot of client companies doing now, which is, creating grids that they bring external clients and suppliers and partners into, but of course don't want them wandering around the entire library, but they can just bring them into a specific, maybe project delivery instance. So completely bespoke. I'm going to jump over that, but just to note for now. And in edit mode, you can see I have this pencil here, and essentially the pencil is the edit mode. I'm just toggling on and off and building, and then seeing, what everybody will see. So you can see here, I'm just going to toggle on and off. I'm back in build mode. So let's just say, for simple example's sake, you've already got developed a methodology. Let's just say, I don't know, let's just call this, let's do a simple one. We'll call it staff onboarding. And let's just say, for argument's sake, you've got a 4-week process. And it, of course, this can be all labeled up. And you can see it's just a edit and click mode. This is something we see actually often as a simple example, not actual stages in a process, but maybe even this idea of applied weeks. And then we're going to add some themes. I don't know. Let's put this one logistics. You get the drift. So all we would say to people that creating new grids completely from scratch and are slightly paralysed by almost a blank sheet of paper is, don't let the sort of the sort of excellence get in the way of good. What we would say is, even if you get your framework 70% right, it's completely dynamic. All of this can be updated as we go. I can sort of make it aesthetically look how I want it to look. I can add new stages, new themes, and move them around at any time. It's completely dynamic. So we'd say just get it, kind of good, and get going, because what also happens is this kind of explosion of intellectual endeavor once the framework is in place. It's almost as if people have, for the first time, have got mental pigeonholes as to where stuff can live. So we really just encourage people to sort of get going. But anyway, let's just say we've created a really simple frame. Maybe we like this idea of some aspects are mandatory and some others, but that's just as I say, completely arbitrary. You can create any legend you want. So we've created a frame and we've created a legend very quickly, and now we're in the realm of creating what, as I say, we call elements. So let's just say, for example, and I'm keeping this super simple, security pass collecting. So here, this might be all of the kind of resources you need to bring this particular kind of step to life. So of course, I can put in text areas, all of the headings are completely updatable, and I might want to describe here why we're even talking about security passes. Maybe, again, you like this idea that there are experts in the organization, and you can see here now I'm just assigning people to the tasks, and in this instance, rather to the expertise in this area. Maybe there is a relevant little explainer video. And you can see this is just a case of selecting a different knowledge resource area. Maybe we've got a template that sits in your cloud sort of document management system. And clearly just add that there. And you can see I'm just dragging and dropping the relevant resource types into this particular kind of element. I'm just going to add a few tasks in here just to give you some examples here. Get my feet a little bit just to serve some up an example in a moment. So a really simple example, but you get from that hopefully how easy it is to just build out an element. And from there, maybe this is a mandatory step. So you can see really quickly, and that's what, less than a couple of minutes, how quick it is to build a frame and start building out, the first examples within it. And then you can speed this up. So for example, we can say, this template works really well for this particular grid. It's often the case. I'm going to call this template example. I can create that to my template library. And then if I want to create another element within this methodology, I can pull back from that library. You can see that sort of preserved the structure, and this sort of just speeds up the development of IP effectively. And it's quite often the case that once a template works for a particular kind of grid, it tends to work across the grid. But hopefully you get from that very short piece just how easy it is to build and, as importantly, maintain and keep keep continuously improving your master references. Okay, so there's point 1 and 2. Remember, point 3 is essentially this really sort of axiomatic point of the two disciplines of project management and knowledge management, project management, rather sort of living hand in glove. So let's just say this is a master grid for it could be master grid for how you deliver one of your services, particular sort of anything potentially you deliver out, and there are instances of it. We've gone down this line now of it being about staff onboarding. So let's just say, for example, now we have an instance of a staff onboarding, and again, the other way to look at this, probably more common actually, is you've got a service proposition that you deliver to your end clients, and now you've won a piece of work and you're in delivery mode. And I should emphasize again, so many organizations tell us that it was a demonstration of their IP that helped them win the work when you're talking about this sort of latter example. So, look at it through either of these kind of contexts, but essentially we're in execution mode now. So what I can do is, firstly, create a completely separate cloned grid from this sort of main master. So if I do that now, essentially what it's doing is creating this completely separate instance. You can see here. If I go back to the grid library, we're just building out in the root folder. You can see here's the master we've created, and here's this completely separate instance, the cloned version. Now, of course, if again you can imagine this is specific staff onboarding or a specific project delivery, all of this now is completely editable. So right up to the, let's just call this now. This is James Smith, and of course, again, particularly in the context of sort of project delivery, it's often the case that there are tweaks to be made. I can move things around. I can add elements. It may be that aspects are completely out of scope. I can completely delete elements of this of the master. Effectively, I'm configuring it for this specific instance. And this is back to the point of the 80-20, is that of course every delivery moment is unique, but broadly speaking, sort of 80% will be per your master, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel every time. And even our clients that are very, very complex construction, building airport terminals, hospital wings, say exactly this point, that 80% is essentially the same as the last major engagement, and it's the 20% they just need to tweak at this point. So hopefully you can see from that just how quick it will be to get the new instance up and running. So there's configuration. Again, remind everybody there's access control, and this might be now adding the particular members of this particular project. And now there is assignment to tasks. So right from the top, I can say, okay, well maybe this, maybe in this instance, Harry's the HR lead. Maybe somebody's going to take on logistics. Maybe somebody else involved over here. And you can see that you can assign the grid level, effectively the project level, the theme level, and the stage level. And of course, right at the deliverable level. So let's just say we're going to keep Rosie on task for all of these aspects. And we come right into here, and actually Rosie's got the job of making sure the photo is taken. And let's just say that I'm going to give myself the job of organising the pass. And then you can see here now, we've also got the ability to schedule this task. So I want those to do that by Friday. I'm going to give myself the following week. So tasks assigned and scheduled. And you'll also see here the ability for reminders to be set. If it's your task, you can set a reminder. You can also attribute the task to only be completed if there is essentially a file attached to it. So if it requires a task that would be evidenced, you can force that attribution that it has to have an evidence linked to be completed. You can nudge colleagues to say, come on, where are we with this task? And you can add it to your respective kind of calendars as well. So now we're in the instance where we've got a project or a particular kind of process that's off and running, and you can see how everything can be essentially assigned and scheduled. And now we're in sort of execution mode. You can also make some really sort of simple but powerful kind of graphic rules come in here. So maybe, for example, I want to say I want a visual cue for when everything is complete within an element. So I can say, when all checklist tasks are complete, let's turn it green. I can put ones for warning me if elements are overdue. And I'm just going to put on here completed, just make a note of the fact I've added that rule. So you can set up some really powerful, just graphical cues as well. So now we're in delivery mode, and this particular project or procedure playbook is off and running. And I know I'm involved in this. Maybe I'm Rosie. I can come into this element, and this is the point of real emphasis. What Rosie now has in one place is all of the resources and the kind of templates and the tools, potentially links to colleagues who are experts to do the work. And in exactly the same place, this productivity, project management, enablement as well. That's keeping us honest to the task and to the schedule. And those two worlds are completely in confluence. So Rosie now, hopefully she's got all the resources she needs. She ticks her way through. Maybe I do one of these tasks. So actually, let me do both to show you how you see the progress is working. You can see this element is complete because we had the graphic rule in place. You can see this is now turned green. And if I come into the sort of dashboard for the particular kind of instance, just take this to full table mode, I can see essentially all the tasks I have left in the step 2. If I show all the tasks that are in this particular kind of grid, you can see they're the 3 that have been signed off. So really powerful way of checkpoint reporting, managing where we are with a project within the actual grid itself. Let me come back onto here. I'm just going to untick mine just to show how some of the dashboard is working. So, well, hopefully you get, that was that key third point, is just to, the really unique essence of MetaGrid is how these two worlds, come together in one place. And of course, what that means is, when you get to the end of a project, because it's all in one sort of platform, you'd probably sit down as a team and say, yeah, what did we learn from that particular instance? Maybe there was a tool that was developed or a great example that was, produced on a project to say, let's take those now and put them back into the master. So for the next iteration, the next team kind of learns from our sort of delivery experience and genuinely getting onto this continuous improvement sort of mindset. Okay, so let's just finish off though now with a quick look at the dashboard. To start off by pointing it out. If I go to my own personal dashboard, the way of, I guess, simply looking at this is there's a bottom-up and a top-down view. If I just look at the bottom-up view first, essentially the individual view, anything that's been assigned to me will appear in my elements, but any tasks that I have will be in my overarching task dashboard. You can see I've only got one that's open, which is the one left on that element we just looked at, and you can see I can manage it all here, including setting reminders. I can flag it if I need, and I can flag across the platform to sort of raise awareness of maybe a delivery issue. But again, this has been the really key point. I can just say, yes, I've completed the task here, or if I just need reminding as to what it is, I can go back, into the specific element within the specific grid. And again, I'm getting all the kind of resource and knowledge I need to actually do the task. So, super kind of powerful way of, helping me keep on top of tasks, but in the same platform where I'm being enabled to deliver them. So that's the kind of, this is where the bottom-up view. The top-down view is more almost coming at it from a portfolio management perspective. So if I'm the sort of, practice lead for this particular account, I might just have an interest in, what are the live projects, tasks, projects, maybe client onboarding grids that we have running. And here I can get a sort of real high-level top-down view. What's the sort of overall status? You can see Harry's flagged, one here. An overarching sense of sort of progress across, across the grid. And with this view, we can sort of then dive down and kind of interrogate as needs be. So hopefully that gives a sort of a heads up on the, the most, I guess, salient characteristics of the solution. Obviously, huge number of other sort of settings and features, but don't want to go for a blow by blow, button by button. I think if you understand those 4 key points, you'll understand fundamentally what MetaGrid is doing that is unique. And then just to sort of say, if you look at our metagrid.com blog roll, you'll see this sort of on the feature updates. You'll get a sense of the roadmap and how the solution's building out. And effectively, we're pushing out a new release at least every fortnight. And so there was sort of the request of the user community and the brilliant ideas that keep flowing back from our many brilliant users. We're not short of ideas that we'll be developing over the coming weeks and months. So if you want to get a sense of that, then just take a look at the blog roll. But hopefully that's helped serve to give you a high-level understanding of MetaGrid. If we can help in any further way, please, don't hesitate to get in touch. Love to, chat, and we can set up a discovery call, take it from there.